everyone, and welcome to my channel. My name is Paris, and I'm the author of the Magi trilogy. Book 1's release date is to be announced. However, I can promise you that it's coming out in 2022, and you'll be able to gift it to friends for Christmas if you so desire. Is that a hint about the release date? I don't know. I'll leave that for you guys to decide. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about why I specifically chose indie publishing, and while we're on the topic, I'm going to be comparing indie versus traditional publishing. For those of you who are new or haven't followed me here from Instagram, my handle's the same on there as it is here, by the way, Paris in her books. Make sure to give it a follow after the video, of course. Now that my self-promotion is done, what I was saying is that for those of you who might not know, is I was originally planning on publishing the traditional route. I was actually all set up to start querying last October. Now, a quick side note, the reason I decided not to query last October wasn't because I was making this decision to switch to indie publishing. It was actually because my family was planning on moving and I just didn't have a set return address yet. And where nowadays you can query all online, you can fill out online forms, you can send emails, etc. I just didn't want to risk an agent asking for some form of a hard copy, whether it was one chapter, just a synopsis, etc., and not have an accurate and guaranteed return address to give them. Because sometimes it takes them a bit to get back, and if I was set to move in 6 weeks and I got the response 7 weeks later, I just didn't want to risk that happening. So I made the decision to wait until my family not only moved, but really got settled in. So February comes around, and at this point, I'm starting to think about thinking about publishing again. But I felt really nervous about the thought, and to be honest, I always felt a little nervous when I thought about publishing. When I thought about traditional publishing, when I thought about querying, etc., sending out my manuscript, so on and so forth. But I just racked it up to nerves because it's a really big deal and it's a big thing. So yeah, obviously I'm going to be a bit nervous about it. But the thought of indie publishing started to nag at the back of my mind, and I started to think more and more about it. Let's be honest here, traditional publishing takes a long time, and I was at the point where I really wanted my book out, and indie publishing's shorter timeline was becoming more and more appealing to me. Now, don't quote me 100% on this because I heard this a while ago and I can't remember the original source. However, if you're publishing traditionally and absolutely everything goes right, and by goes right, I mean your first round of agents, you get an agent pretty much right away. They help you format your manuscript in no time at all. They send it off to a publisher. The publisher approves. You start more editing. You get your cover design, so on and so forth. If everything goes super smoothly, it's going to take you about 18 months. That's a year and a half. Whereas with indie publishing, technically speaking, you could publish your book tomorrow. I'm not recommending you do that. That's not exactly the best idea. However, it is technically possible, so there is a big timeline difference. And at this point, I have a following on Instagram. You guys want my book. I have people asking when's it coming out, and I was getting pretty sick and tired of saying, I don't know, because honestly, I want to know too. And a little secret, I do have a set release date in mind. I just have yet to announce it because I'm waiting for my editing to get a little further along, but I do have a pretty darn exact date in mind. More on that later. I'm going to release that as soon as possible. It is coming, just not quite yet. Anyway, the timeline actually isn't what ultimately made me switch. What really led me to make that decision was two things. The first being creative liberty. The Magi is book 1 in a trilogy, and I not only know how I want the trilogy to end, so book 1 is on draft 7, book 2 is on draft 2, and I'm about a quarter of the way done with the first draft of book 3. So I have a lot of words written, and I have spent endless hours of amount of time on this. So I didn't want to lose my creative liberty and have a publisher tell me they want book 2 to end differently. They don't like the plot for book 3. They want me to cut this character in book 1. They don't think this scene works. They want me to add some more content in this area, so on and so forth. I wanted to keep my creative liberty because I've spent hours on this project and it's solid in my mind. Like I know exactly how everything works. I understand the world because the Magi takes place in another world. I know all these elements. I didn't want to need to change them. Now, that being said, traditional publishers asking you to change things is not necessarily a bad thing by default. They have not only your book in mind, but they have themselves in mind, and they want to sell what is going to sell. So they're going to ask you to change things if they don't think something works. If they don't think this aspect is going to sell well, they're going to ask you to change it. If they think that this this idea that they have will make your book sell better, they're going to ask you to add it in, so on and so forth. It's not necessarily a bad thing. However, if you're like me and you want to create your creative liberty, that thought is not a good thing in your mind. I was also honestly terrified of losing my rights. I wanted to keep my rights, and so because of that, I decided to go indie, and that brings me to my second big reason why I made this switch. That nervous feeling I was talking about earlier when I just felt like queasy at the thought of querying, I really think that was God pushing me in the right direction. I think it was him, you know, nudging me into, you're supposed to be going this route, Paris. I don't know what you're doing with traditional. And I have not looked back since I decided to go indie. I feel very confident that I've made the right decision, and I'm very excited to be an upcoming indie author. I'm very excited to join the indie author community. Now, something that I would say is it's not a straightforward decision. When I made the decision, it wasn't just thinking about creative rights, it wasn't just thinking about what felt right. I actually went and I wrote a pros and cons list, and I really recommend, if you're making this decision to go between indie and traditional publishing, make a pros and cons list, because you're really going to want to compare the two. Now, my list, I'm going to share it with you guys in a minute. It is by no means complete. It is really just what pertained to me personally when I thought of the straightforward, the bare facts. Okay, these are the big difference between the two. There are a lot more fine differences, there are more big differences, so on and so forth. These are just the aspects that I was considering that were my main concern. So I have my pros and cons list right here. I have indie on this side, traditional on this side, and I sat down, I compared both of these, and it became more and more clear that indie was kind of the one for me, because I was struggling with coming up with negative things for indie and struggling to come up with good things for traditional. Not to say that one is better than the other, it really depends on the person. For me personally, I just felt more and more so that indie felt right. Other people are going to feel the exact opposite, or maybe you feel the same way as I do. Either way, I'm going to share the list and I'm going to compare a little more in depth the differences between the two. Now, the main difference that I was really keeping in the back of my mind was the rights. With indie publishing, you get to keep 100% of the rights. It's your book. You get to decide how it ends, how long it is, how many words it is. You get to decide who edits it, what the cover looks like, the name, everything. Absolutely everything about it. You keep all of those rights. Traditional publishing, you're going to lose some of your rights. Now, since I never got to this stage, I cannot tell you that this is exactly how it works, but my basic understanding is that, you know, you're going to sign a contract with your publisher, with your agent, so on and so forth, and when you sign on with your publisher, they're gonna take some of your rights, and the amount they take is, you know, up to the contract. It's a case-by-case basis. Traditional publishers traditionally want most of the rights. Now, obviously, you're going to keep some of the rights because, you know, it's your book, you're writing it, but they might want the rights to your characters. And when I say they have the rights to their characters, I mean, if you decide later that you want to do a spin-off, you need their permission. Even though they're your original characters, they have the rights, so you can't use them unless that you have their permission. Again, not necessarily a bad thing. I'm going to go into more pros later. As I mentioned before, part of it comes down to what's going to sell. Your traditional publisher has themselves to protect and themselves in mind. If your book flops, it's not just you on the line, it's them too. They're only going to want to represent the quote-unquote best. And by best, I don't mean content and quality, I just mean what's going to sell. Now, moving on to the next thing is, again, this is going to change case-by-case basis, but when I was looking up research on the amount of royalties that you'll get, you can get up to 70% of the royalties with indie publishing. Again, that's not exact, it depends on who you're publishing with, and by who you're publishing with, I mean KDP, IncomeSpark, etc. And the cost of the item, the print cost, so on and so forth. You can keep up to 70% of the royalties. Traditional publishing, you keep up to about 25% of the royalties. Again, that can change. You could get more than that, you could get less. It really just depends on the publisher and several different aspects as well. But that's a big difference. 70 versus 25% is huge. Absolutely huge difference. So that was another thing I was keeping in mind. If I want to make money off of this book, I'm going to be getting more off of my indie publishing book. However, there is more of an investment with indie publishing. Everything falls on you when you're doing indie. You have to edit, format, get the cover, so on and so forth. Now, you can hire people to do it. I'm not saying you need to do everything yourself. You absolutely can. I have somebody do my cover for me. The cover, guys, I saw it the other day. It looks amazing. I absolutely cannot wait to share it with you, and it's something that I've been trying not to talk about because I don't want to accidentally spoil what it is, but it's amazing and I love it. So traditional publishing is you're going to have help with that. They're going to help you with the process. They're going to help you find an editor. They're going to help you find a cover artist, so on and so forth. However, this goes back to the rights thing. My idea that I have set for my cover might not be what the traditional publisher thinks is going to sell the best, so they might want to change certain aspects of it. Again, goes back to the rights. I've told you guys the rights were a really big thing for me, and I'm going to keep going back to that. Another difference, as I mentioned before, is the timeline. I could guarantee that I can publish in 2022 with self-publishing, could not guarantee that with traditional publishing. As I said before, people ask me, when's your book coming out? I don't know. With traditional publishing, first of all, you might not know right away, but then even when you do know, you might not be allowed to talk about it. You're not supposed to say when you have an agent, you're not supposed to say these things. There's a lot more secrecy with it. With indie publishing, I have the rights. I can tell you guys absolutely whatever I want to tell you. If I really wanted to, I could send you guys half the book right now. Am I going to do that? No, please don't get your hopes up. I'm not doing that. But I technically could. So like I said, you get all of this, you get control of the timeline, you get control of the looks, so on and so forth. Another difference is, again, falls into the timeline, is you go straight to publishing when you're doing self. When you're doing traditional, I did not realize this at first, so I don't know if it was just I didn't realize this or if it's not always common knowledge, but you don't go straight to publishing when you're doing traditional publishing. There are some exceptions to this, but for the most part, if you want like a good or a big publishing house, they do not accept unsolicited submissions. You need to have an agent beforehand, which means that there's 2 steps. Instead of going straight to publishing, you have to go through an agent, get your agent, get that all set up, and then you have to go to a publisher. The agent's going to help you go to a publisher, so on and so forth. They're not going to take unrepresented manuscripts. Now, when you have your agent, you have help. And when you're publishing the self route, you're not going to get that help. It's all on you. Is that necessarily a bad thing? No. If you're like me, you like kind of doing things yourself. I like being able to call all the shots. So for me, I personally enjoy it. That's not the case for everybody because an agent really helps you. Now, another thing, talking about the help from the traditional versus not having help with self, is marketing. When you are publishing, when you're doing the indie route, when you're publishing by yourself, 100% of the marketing falls on you. It is all your responsibility. How much you market, when you market, how many sales you get, it's all depending on how much you market. Technically speaking, you don't need to market. You could just hit publish on your book and, that's it. You're not going to sell many books that way, though. You absolutely need to, you need to market. Like, if you want to sell your book, you don't have to, but I recommend doing it. When you're publishing traditionally, you are going to have some marketing help. They can help you get into bookstores. They can help you get your name out there. However, they're not going to want to represent you if you're not willing to hold some of the marketing front yourself. So you will still absolutely need to market your book. So honestly, if I'm being completely honest here, I don't think there should be a difference between the marketing. I think you should do the same amount of marketing if you're going indie or if you're going traditional because you want to sell your book. Just the thing is, you don't have that extra boost and that extra help of a publisher when you are publishing by yourself. Again, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, particularly because I believe your marketing strategy should remain relatively the same whether you're going indie or self. So you have more work if you're going indie publishing, but you also lose some of your rights and it might take longer. So there's definitely pros and cons to both. I'm not going to say one is better than the other because honestly, it's a case-by-case basis. And you know what else? You can self-publish some books and publish traditionally with other books. You're not stuck with one or the other. You're not going to put yourself in a box. So it's really not just a person by person, but a book by book basis. How do you think your book is going to sell best? For me, I think my book can sell best indie because I love doing things. I love doing things myself anyway, and I'm really enjoying the process. I'm teaching myself how to format so I can do it myself, and I have my cover ready, and I got to choose exactly how I want it to look, and I'm really enjoying the process. That might not be what you find fun, and that's fine. You can go traditional route, you can go self. There's also the hybrid option. Now, hybrid I don't know as much about, so you're not going to really hear me mention it too much just because I don't really know too much about it, but there is that option as well. You guys have lots of options for it, and I would be curious about knowing. So if you guys Or let me know in the comments, are you going indie or traditional, and why? Or are you still in the process of making that decision, and what do you think you're leaning towards? Let me know. I would love to hear about it, and I'd love to talk with you guys. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit subscribe if you want to help follow me through more videos and more adventures and my publishing journey. Again, release date is coming ASAP. When that is, I don't know. I wish I could tell you guys, but it's coming soon. I'm making that decision, so lots of exciting things to do and lots of other videos to make. So I will see you guys next time, and have a great rest of your day, night, morning, evening, whatever time it is. Have a good day.